When remembering my childhood, everything seems so much more vivid, intense, and colorful. I remember the walls of my room at my dad's house being way more blue than they actually are. Corn dogs being the most delicious thing I'd ever consumed. And I remember the job of the health inspector being way more evil than it actually is.
I'm Mr. Limp, the health inspector, and I'm here to shut this place down.
And this is definitely because the archetype of the no-nonsense, by-the-books, petty and antagonistic health inspector is weirdly prevalent in a lot of pop culture, especially pop culture consumed by children and young adults. Think Hugo Habercor from Bob's Burgers, the rule-abiding, short-sleeve, button-down wearing ex-boyfriend of Bob's wife, hell-bent on shutting down the struggling family-owned restaurant.
The burger joint's natural enemy.
Larry from Friends, Phoebe's one-episode boyfriend, a humorless bureaucrat trying to shut down the Friends' favorite cafe. Nadar Cassard from Ratatouille, who ends up shutting down the legendary French restaurant Gusteau's due to the fact that they're, rats in the kitchen. The fedora-wearing no-fun fish from SpongeBob, who Mr. Krabs and SpongeBob accidentally murder. And while this image of the health inspector as a sight of evil was definitely present in my childhood, this was certainly a portrait that followed me well into my adult years. As a food service worker of 8 years, owners would come in and inspect the kitchens I was working in and be like, "See that little mark on the fridge? If the health inspector came in, that would be a $1,000 fine." And I'd be like, damn, these guys aren't playing around, before fearfully cleaning the kitchen extra hard for my minimum wage pay. And I'm certainly not the only person who's had these feelings. In doing just a quick online search, I was able to find countless think pieces, like the aptly named Thrillist article, 16 Ways Health Inspectors Are Huge Jerks, as well as so many Reddit posts from frustrated business owners and customers, calling out regulations and standards that they deem to be unfair. So what is it exactly about the health inspector that causes these intense reactions of fear and annoyance? At a first glance, we can understand the image of the health inspector as being annoying the same way we might find the DMV annoying. A confusing, soul-crushing bureaucratic purgatory in which arbitrary rules reign over human decency and consideration. As if health inspectors, get off watching small family-owned businesses that bring a sense of joy and community to the public fail. And to me, the fact that this image is so specifically present in children's and young adult media is so interesting. Basically using the figure of the health inspector as a way to present children with popular North American understandings of government systems. Something that is so inherently political. As someone who did their master's thesis on environmental messaging in children's animation, I am no stranger to discourse surrounding politics in children's content. People will watch a film like WALL-E or Happy Feet and be like, what is this left-wing propaganda in my children's content? We don't need to get all Al Gore with it, I just want my child to be entertained. But the fact of the matter is, while there are certainly children's films and television shows that are more overtly political than others, such as Happy Feet, WALL-E, Captain Planet, or Ferngully, with clear environmentalist leanings, God forbid, at the end of the day, what narrative with a point of view and morals can really be deemed apolitical? How could you possibly create a story that doesn't carry the weight of our society's embedded histories, inequalities, and social structures? I would say that 95% of the time when discussions of children's politics in film and other media do come up, they mostly appear as fear-mongering from right-leaning individuals who view narratives that even slightly vary from sheltered pro-capitalist, white, heteronormative American values as dangerous propaganda. Part of the woke agenda, if you will. Even before the live-action Disney Little Mermaid came out and we even knew what the plot was about, so many people were criticizing Disney for casting Chloe Bailey as Ariel because, it was white redhead erasure or something. A take that is definitely not caked in racism, but hey. But if we're gonna be nitpicking things that exist outside of the status quo, what exactly is the status quo? Why is a black actress playing a mermaid so shocking? Yet we find the image of a bureaucratic government agent like a health inspector getting severely injured or put in his place so universally chill. In this video, I thought it would be at best fun and at the very least a little bit interesting to really get to the bottom of this character archetype of the health inspector. What are these pieces of media trying to say about government bureaucracy? What is the status quo when it comes to thinking about capitalism and bureaucracy in North America? What values can we extract from these readings? How does this worldview ultimately affect the poor, naive children engaging with this content? Today, we're gonna find out. But first, Hi, my name is Emma Chang-Kredl. Welcome or welcome back to my channel. It's so lovely to have you here. I'm sure literally none of you know this about me, but over the last year, I've just constantly been like, wouldn't it be fun to make a little video about cartoon health inspectors? Like, what's up with that? And here I am today, living the dream. As always, I want to say thank you so much for your constant support on my channel. If you want to continue supporting my channel, you can subscribe if you haven't already. You can like this video, share it with your friends, leave a comment, check out my Patreon if you feel so inclined to. But yes, thank you so much. Let's get back to the topic of the health inspector.
Welcome, I'm the manager here.
One of the most classic examples I could find of a stereotypical health inspector in children's media was in the 5th episode of the 2nd season of Tom and Jerry in New York. Here, Tom and Jerry's residency in a hotel is jeopardized due to a surprise visit by a government health inspector, with the hotel manager threatening to kick out the duo should they cause any issues during the inspection. The health inspector comes in a rotten mood, seemingly ready to shut down the establishment at a moment's notice, sending the manager into a panic.
You just made the list, my furry friend. That's strike one.
After a few more strikes, the trio is able to win back the favor of the inspector by giving him a concussion, allowing him to forget the mess he witnessed, giving the hotel a passing grade. With the character of the health inspector, there is definitely a sense of vindictiveness and power tripping in this role, a barrier that hardworking business owners must face in order to stay afloat. While potentially shutting down businesses due to health code violations is a part of the job description, the role is definitely more nuanced and varied than what we might see from this content. Aside from the inspection of these more private establishments, seeking to shut them down, health inspectors inspect a wide range of public services, from public pools to schools to hospitals. They educate establishments on workplace hazards, accidents, and environmental conditions. They come up with health and safety strategies and programs to ensure the health of workers and the general public. Essentially, health inspectors are supposed to be a service to protect workers and the general public. Sounds pretty reasonable, right? So what's the issue? Well, firstly, as employees of the government, health inspectors are part of a larger bureaucratic system. According to Investopedia, bureaucracy can be defined as, quote, a complex organization that has multi-layered systems and processes. Typically, bureaucracies are designed with the intention of maintaining uniformity and control within the organization. The word is often used to describe procedures that effectively slow down decision-making, unquote. While bureaucracies definitely exist in the private sector, like universities and school systems are often very bureaucratic. Banks like IBM have really hierarchical bureaucratic structures. Bureaucracy is most commonly understood as government systems with strict and seemingly arbitrary rules, tons of paperwork, dizzyingly slow wait times, like the DMV, tax agencies, the post office.
Just fill out the 1170.
I filled this out.
That's the 1190. You're gonna have to go stand in the blue line.
Look, I was already in that line.
So, you here for an eye test? Read this.
In his failed reign of terror trying to rid the American government of bureaucracy, Elon Musk went as far as to state,
for a lot of people, the maybe most direct experience with the government is the DMV. And then the important thing to remember is the government is the DMV at scale. How much do you want to scale it?
a pretty common talking point of the right is that government agencies and the slow-moving, rule-intensive bureaucratic systems that they encompass are just basically the enemy of progress. They're anti-business and anti-innovation. So how does this come into play when discussing the role of the health inspector in children's media? Health inspectors occupy such a specific and genuinely funny portrait of bureaucracy in popular media because they're someone that everyone at any age can understand as being the enemy. While there are definitely more serious bureaucratic systems that children would understand, like Child Protective Services, that can be pretty traumatic and complicated and doesn't really have the potential for inherently humorous portrayals. And beyond just fictional media, when doing my research, there were just so many stories about health inspectors shutting down children's lemonade stands for not having proper permits, which is just so easily translated into cartoonish villain behavior. A figure that has no compassion, a drone prowling around trying to stifle children's imagination and entrepreneurial grind sets. And like every part of that image is just so funny to me. Oftentimes in the media we'll be discussing today, the role of the health inspector is viewed as being somewhat absurd. In a 1992 episode of the Addams Family cartoon, Dead and Breakfast, Wednesday and Pugsley transformed their family home into a bed and breakfast, or rather a dead and breakfast, as a part of a
creative problem solving through junior career exploration
in school. In classic Addams Family tradition, the D&B is kind of twisted, with things like piranha baths being offered as amenities, with the health inspector quite earnestly inquiring about the safety of these services.
Piranha baths? Are you sure? What if someone gets hurt?
Oh, we don't charge extra for that.
And this humorlessly earnest demeanor in such a ridiculous situation is very telling of the ways in which we understand bureaucratic positions, like those of the health inspector.
I'm Mr. Limp, the health inspector, and I'm here to shut this place down.
When talking about portrayals of frustration with bureaucracy, it's hard not to bring up Franz Kafka's most famous work, The Trial, a story of a man, K, who was arrested for a crime he did not commit, and his dizzyingly absurd journey to figure out what he did, climbing the ladder of bureaucracy, faced with countless bureaucratic entities who simply explain that they have no clue what he did. They're just following their jobs and procedures. They have no answers. In a lot of ways, Kafka's claim to fame as a writer was his ability to portray the bureaucracy of individuals going through these almost comedically bureaucratic systems. Something that I think has undoubtedly influenced the trope of the health inspector that we're talking about today. A figure that is so committed to the rules that they lose their general sense of humanity. They're just these absurd bureaucratic figures. And this idea of the health inspector's lack of humanity as an absurd form of villain behavior makes perfect sense when you take into account the fact that in almost all of the narratives we'll be discussing today, the businesses that the health inspector is threatening are often small, family-owned, and run by the show or film's protagonists. In Ratatouille, we see Remy the rat from a poor family that scrounges for food out of necessity, attempt to both escape poverty and follow his passion for French cuisine through infiltrating his dream restaurant, Gusteau's. While Remy is obviously very different from the restaurant's new owner, Skinner, who is greedy and power-hungry, their dreams are pretty much the same, to own and operate a successful French restaurant. Remy is undeniably a passionate and talented cook, coming from a financially difficult background, and it's hard not to root for him. While the health inspector in the film is quite mild-mannered and quiet, as opposed to other portrayals we'll be discussing today, we understand him as an inherent threat to Remy's passion and hard work ethic. Whether or not the health inspector would sympathize for him, his job is to follow the rules.
Stop that health inspector!
Which ultimately leads to the closing of Gusteau's. The health inspector in Ratatouille is not interested in Remy's backstory, his class struggles, his passion and talent for cooking. He just simply sees rats in the kitchen and shuts everything down. Similarly, Bob's Burgers, a show that's mostly known as an adult animation but is watched by many older kids and teenagers, follows the Belcher family through their journeys with their failing burger restaurant, run by Bob Belcher and his wife Linda, as well as their unpaid young children Tina, Jean, and Louise. The episodes, while varied, often incorporate Bob and his family trying to find new ways for their restaurant to grow and succeed, all while facing numerous barriers from greedy landlords, petty health inspectors, and other forces of power. Here we see the small business, the backbone of the US economy, those trying to painstakingly get a small piece of the American dream, become victims of systems of bureaucracy and corporate greed. We want to root for the characters that have a lot of humanity, passion, and entrepreneurial spirit, not the forces that try to undermine these qualities. Therefore, in this dynamic, the health inspector becomes inherently unlikable. And to me, this doesn't seem so different from the example I gave before of people being mad about health inspectors shutting down children's lemonade stands. The entrepreneurial mindset is something that children just inherently understand and is easily translatable in this media. Films or television shows like Bob's Burgers or Ratatouille are applauded by a lot of left-leaning or progressive people for being critical of the inequality present in capitalist systems. The show even goes so far as to discuss some of the unethical qualities of small business ownership, like discussions of the children not getting paid, the benefits of worker-owned businesses. But ultimately, these criticisms we see in Bob's Burgers are, at the end of the day, still found in a show about a restaurant owner. While he can risk losing his business and losing money, he still owns the business. And the show is very aware of this. Bob never becomes successful because if he did, Why would we want to root for a successful restaurant owner? What films and shows like Ratatouille and Bob's Burgers show us is that we like capitalism when it fits into the mold of what we would consider to be ethical. We enjoy rooting for the underdog, watching them fight their way to the top of this unforgiving system. And this is really a double-edged sword, because it portrays capitalism as a system that keeps the rich rich and the poor poor through structural inequality, but at the same time still upholds the dream of escaping poverty through enough passion and hard work against all odds. Good capitalism. While we're on the topic of ethics, Bob's Burgers brings up another point: the potential for bias and corruption within health inspections. In Bob's Burgers, Hugo Habercor is a health inspector and a recurring villain within the show. Beyond being by the books and hell-bent on shutting down the restaurant, there is also a conflict of interest, with Hugo being the ex-boyfriend of Linda, Bob's wife. And this brings up another problem that people have with health inspectors. While being a government employee who's supposed to follow certain codes of ethics and regulations, who's often seen as robotic and emotionless, health inspectors are also people with emotions and biases. In a few restaurants I worked in with what I would describe as questionable safety standards and cleanliness, owners were passed with flying colors due to previous relationships they had with health inspectors, an issue that is definitely worth noting. In Friends, Phoebe's one-off boyfriend, Larry the health inspector, is pretty much introduced through a joke about bureaucratic corruption.
Do health inspectors work on commission?
No, bribes.
And through these depictions, it's easy to see this form of street-level bureaucracy the same way we might see the police: easily corruptible to those who have money and overly harsh to those who don't. Whether we like it or not, a lot of our understandings of what community space is based in capitalism, meeting up in various privately owned establishments that offer goods and services, warm meals, and a meeting place. The idea that you come into an establishment, pay for your time, and are able to enjoy the space. In this sense, the government threatens the sense of security through rigid, sometimes seemingly arbitrary measures. In the one where Ross moves away, Joey enters the scene stating,
"You guys got anything to eat? I just went down to Jono's for some chicken and it was closed."
I took Larry there to eat, but it was all violated, so we shut it down.
Jeeves, if this guy keeps closing down all our favorite places, where are we gonna eat?
And while the character of Larry is clearly an exaggerated portrait of a health inspector on a power trip, in doing my research, I found a number of people asking very similar questions to Joey in this scene. In this one Reddit post, a man states that his breakfast was ruined by a health inspection in a small immigrant-run establishment, questioning why we even need health inspectors when we can make our own informed decisions about where we want to eat and what we consider to be clean. And while I don't agree with this, it does really tie back to this idea of the sanctity of small businesses in North America. But the fact of the matter is, while we love to view small businesses as this precious thing that we have in society, in opposition to big, greedy corporations, small businesses are not inherently more ethical, especially when it comes to treatment of employees and labor practices. At the end of the day, whether you're creating a business out of passion or desire for wealth, you want to be as successful as possible. Many small business owners would love to see their businesses expand and grow. Further, you're inherently in a position of power as a boss to your employees. While I can definitely say a lot about some of the bigger corporations I've worked at, I will say at the bottom of my heart that some of the absolute worst labor experiences I've had in my life were with small businesses. In pretty much every small business I worked in, there were so few regulations when it came to how employees were paid and treated and, like their safety. I constantly felt guilted and taken advantage of, while simultaneously having no real sense of stability. While in larger corporations, I've been able to voice my concerns about my mistreatment to HR and, I've been in unions and stuff. You don't really have that ability in some small businesses when the only person you can complain to is the person mistreating you. While small businesses may be less bureaucratic and more intimate, they are businesses nonetheless, working within our current system of capitalism. Workers' comfortability and safety is often placed second to profit and convenience. In line with our understanding of bureaucracy as inherently time-consuming and tedious, the figure of the health inspector is often understood as a speed bump on the road to success, because it causes us to slow down. When we think of successful businesses, we might think of a well-oiled machine. In order to limit issues and maximize profits, everything should be as convenient as possible. A visit from the health inspector really halts this machine, sometimes causing changes to routine that may just be inconvenient. Convenience is certainly an essential desire under capitalism. In Inconvenience, my former professors Joshua Neves and Mark Steinberg, shout out, even go as far as to state, quote, "At an everyday level, convenience can no longer be limited to coziness, ease, or comfort. It is quite simply the price of admission." While of course at a base level we like when things are easy, under capitalism we're always busy and stressed. Stressed about getting to work on time, performing well, maintaining financial security, alongside other stresses we feel in the few hours in which we're not working to make a living. And because of this, the convenience of something like next day delivery on Amazon or ordering fast food has in many ways become the norm. And this stress exacerbating the need for convenience is often placed on the shoulders of people like Amazon delivery drivers, fast food workers, food delivery people. Between 2019 and 2022, I worked at a chain of family-owned restaurants, which were run by an ex-corporate baddie from a very wealthy family. She had very little previous experience in the restaurant industry and was oftentimes very over her head. She often talked about her worries about money, even though, she just bought her 16-year-old son a brand new Mercedes SUV, and placed this stress on me and the other workers, oftentimes understaffing the restaurant, cutting my hours, giving me way more responsibilities than my pay grade. And since she started cutting corners, guess who found any excuse to do as little work as possible? Me. When working conditions aren't the best, employees often don't feel like putting their all into their job, and things often just spiral from here. Maybe it starts with forgetting to label certain items in the walk-in freezer, forgetting to clean out certain corners of the fridge. Honestly, just wanting to go home early. One piece of health inspector media that really resonated with me in a pretty funny way was the season 3 episode of SpongeBob SquarePants' Nasty Patty, in which SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs tell the story of the time they thought they murdered a health inspector. While the health inspector in this episode does come into the Krusty Krab with a dry, no-nonsense attitude, wearing a suit and fedora, carrying a clipboard, the episode doesn't really vilify him beyond that. In fact, the duties he performs are more so those of a food critic rather than an inspector, focusing on trying every item off the menu rather than inspecting the premises. The episode is instead a really funny and thought-provoking story about the absurd lack of ethics in some small business practices. The episode opens with SpongeBob doing his job while Mr. Krabs bathes in money, before he literally smells a health inspector walking in. He panics, asking SpongeBob to clean up everything as quickly as possible. After a news announcement comes on the screen discussing a fake health inspector going around restaurants to get free food, Krabs literally threatens SpongeBob into making a disgusting Krabby Patty to feed to the inspector to get back at him.
"Join me, boy, or you're fired!"
As the health inspector is about to take a bite of the rightfully named Nasty Patty, a fly flies into his mouth and he chokes. A newscast appears on the screen stating that the fake health inspector has been caught. Krabs and SpongeBob just killed the real health inspector. After an absurd journey to hide the body from the police, the health inspector wakes up scared, giving the restaurant a pass. While the episode follows a similar format to the other media we've discussed today, a stern health inspector who gets a concussion and hastily passes the establishment, I would argue that this episode of SpongeBob is really the antithesis to portrayals of health inspectors taking down small businesses. Because while ultimately a plot of misfortunate misunderstandings, Mr. Krabs is clearly the most wrong in the situation, from his initial greed to his constant willingness to throw SpongeBob under the bus to save himself.
"What's this wee stuff? You fed him the tainted patty. Looks like it's the stony lonesome for you."
When trying to get to the bottom of this episode's understanding of capitalism and bureaucracy through its portrayals of the health inspector, one thing I noticed was this shared feeling of personal responsibility that at the end of the day didn't really benefit anyone. Mr. Krabs feels the burden of losing the business that he has monetary stakes in. SpongeBob feels the burden of responsibility to perform tasks to keep the business afloat. The health inspector probably feels the burden of being hated in the this space and being the person who holds the power to choose whether the restaurant should stay open or not. And to me, this really points to a huge problem that we're currently facing, both with small businesses under capitalism and the bureaucratic systems that hold them accountable. Instead of being a system that helps businesses, workers, and the general public to feel more safe in community spaces, everyone begins to feel like a victim, some more rightfully than others. Like the example of the SpongeBob episode, no one is happy in this scenario, especially the workers. But at the end of the day, it can be really hard to just sit down and examine these dynamics when everything in the business world, especially the food service industry, just moves so fast. While bureaucracy is annoying and often lacks human relatability, accessibility, and is certainly rich with corruption, there is really something to be said about a process that kind of just forces us to slow down and think beyond the frameworks of convenience and the fast-paced nature of business. I also think there is a genuine need to have regular health inspections, but clearly these systems that we have in place aren't working well, given the animosity we see between business owners, workers, and health inspectors. And this really ties back to the larger issue that we've been discussing today. How do these portrayals of small businesses versus bureaucracy affect the ways in which children and young adults consuming media understand systems of government and capitalism at large? One thing that I noticed about some of the media pieces we've discussed today, such as Ratatouille, Bob's Burgers, and SpongeBob, is that they definitely function as critiques of capitalist systems and their embedded inequality, but also, in a sense, reinforce them. Like, I understand why these shows would critique capitalism, then return to the status quo. It is arguably a realistic portrayal, but at the same time, criticism through stereotypical, satirical lenses can only take us so far. Even if these pieces of media are being critical, when we see the normalization of certain structures being portrayed time and time again, they become, well, normal. Seeing a health inspector as a figure that solely causes stress towards the most hardworking and passionate amongst us makes it challenging to view the role of food safety from any alternative lens. The issue I take with this, health inspector slander doesn't come from a place of thinking that government health inspection or other forms of government bureaucracy are perfect systems. Far from it. What I instead take issue with is the normalization of things like safety and education as being the antithesis to things like creativity and innovation. And if we want to foster imagination in our children, why can't we be imaginative when it comes to the ways in which we discuss existing structures, as opposed to maintaining these status quos? While I understand that health inspector plots are often easy ways to inject conflict into a story, it would be so interesting to see them from a different lens. It could be interesting to study the ways in which issues people have with health inspectors can be reformed, instead of, simply shitting on them and leaving it at that. What would it look like if health inspectors were working with community spaces? What would a more cooperative system look like, focusing on teaching and learning instead of penalizing establishments? While to some, it may seem overly political to portray something like inclusive ownership or peer-reviewed health inspections, is this really any more political than the current portrayals we're seeing? Or does it simply go against the status quo, leading to feelings of discomfort? Children's media holds such a special place in my heart as well as my research because these pieces of media can so effectively be used as tools for children to discuss things like creativity, problem solving, and real-world issues, which I personally don't think needs to take anything away from the entertainment value of this media. And while I don't expect to see a bunch of children's media discussing worker co-ops in the near future, the pieces of media we've discussed today can really lay the foundation for engaging conversation about conflict and the ways in which we want to see the future. And this doesn't mean teaching your children the ins and outs of government bureaucracy. It can be as simple as asking them how they view certain characters, what they think the moral of these stories are, how they interpret these portrayals, in order to kickstart this type of thinking, which ultimately, to me, is just as, if not more creative, than instilling children with an entrepreneurial mindset as a source of creativity, such as a lemonade stand. While satire and stereotypes can be a useful way of understanding patterns in the way we perceive certain groups of people, I believe that we can go further than this and really dig into why these systems are the way they are and how we want to see them in the future, as opposed to being like, that's just the way it is. Because at the end of the day, That's just not very useful, is it? But yes, that's going to be the end of the video today. Thank you so much if you stayed till the end of this video. Thank you as always for supporting my channel. I have some really fun stuff coming up in the month of July, so I hope you stick around for that. Like I said before, if you want to support my channel in any way, you can like this video, leave a comment, share, subscribe if you haven't already, check out my Patreon. But yes, thank you so much as always. Love you.